3,
2.
Okay, all right. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
3,
2.
Welcome back to Andy and Jen Talk About Stuff. I'm Andy.
I'm Jen.
And we're going to talk about stuff today. The stuff we're going to talk about today is 2008 and 9, which, depending on how old you are when you're watching this, 2008 and 9 might have looked different or felt different to you. In 2008 and 9, we were young adults. We had our first and second daughters at that point, and I was in the mortgage industry, and the entire bottom of the financial industry fell out and collapsed and took all of us with it. It was kind of like a tidal wave, like just crashed on shore and like just swept everything out to sea. That's kind of how it felt to me in like a one sentence summary.
Yeah.
But there's a reason we're talking about this, because so many things happened for us that challenged us, the blessings that came because of it, restarting some things, and something that most people don't know is, filing bankruptcy, what that looked like, and then coming out of that on the other side and having that kind of help along the way, and why overcoming that resistance to initially wanting to do bankruptcy. I just had this social faux pas, but we're gonna talk about all that stuff today. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Where does that story start for you though? In the whole 2008-9 kind of the epicenter is, hey, everything, the bottom fell out, and I was in the mortgage industry at the time, and we're here at the office now that the family still owns, but where does that whole story start for your side of this?
For me, we were brand new parents. We're only a couple years in, and I had really, really been seeing you go after something for the first time in a long time that you were really passionate about, but at the same time, I knew the Lord was saying, hey, there were certain things within that he was saying, maybe don't. And I was receiving a lot of the warnings attached to the decisions that were being made in the natural. And so in my prayer time, the Lord is saying, hey, Andy shouldn't partner with or step into this. Meanwhile, in the natural, that's what made most sense to you. But I am a stay-at-home mom. I am supporting whatever you are choosing. And with the babies, I just was immersed in that, trying to make sure that I was getting my bearings in that, but also trying to figure out how to encourage you forward into something that was really brand new to our family. Like it was an exciting thing for you because you were really good at it and you had great partners in it. But at the same time, for me, I'm hearing the Lord say, hey, don't go this way, as to where you were choosing that direction. So it was a very unsteady season because I didn't know how to back you while also staying faithful to what the Lord was calling us towards.
Yeah, it was a difficult time because we were only a couple years. I say me and the family. We were only a couple years into doing the mortgage space to begin with. So in 2005, we had started what's now called Mortgage Heroes, but back in the day, it had different names. And by 2007, we had bought our first house from Tommy and Heather at the time. We bought their house from them, so we had bought our first house. Caitlin, we welcomed her in 2005, and then in 2007, we welcomed Jill. In 2007 is also when we opened up the offices, which were here in Eastlake. So this one we still have today, and the one that's at the end of this building that we had ended up letting go and losing everything. But that one was my responsibility with our business partner, Brian Franzen, at the time. So in 2007, we moved into that space and we were like hot to trot. The market was doing what it was doing. And it's like business is falling out of the sky, right? It was like super easy and everyone was doing it. Even people that weren't really doing real estate or mortgages, their full-time thing, were still closing deals and buying houses and refinancing. And now you look back and you're like, oh my gosh, there was a ton wrong with all that because those who were closer to the epicenter of what was brewing behind the scenes knew, oh my God, this is going to explode or implode and be a massive problem. But there's a bunch of us younger folks that I didn't know all the intricacies of the market interplay. And I didn't understand that what was happening in real time was causing a potential danger down the road. Now looking back, I'm like, oh my God, how could I have been so stupid or naive? But I was actually just naive. I didn't know the market stuff I know now. In fact, the stuff that happened in, in the fall of '07 is when like I first saw credit lines stopping, like HELOCs stop, banks stop offering this, banks stop offering that. I saw credit limits start getting chopped, home equity line of credits getting chopped. If it was unused, it was being like corrected down to what your balance was. And that was all early signs of what was eventually the impending doom of 2008 and the bottom falling out of the whole damn thing.
Right.
And that was wild because I had this opinion and this perspective, like young. I was 29 in 2008. Hadn't even turned 30 yet. And we had 2 kids, our first house. I was like, oh my gosh, we're living out our life in this like cookie cutter, American dream kind of way. Like we're married and we're happy and we have these kids and we have a house and I'm mowing the lawn on the weekend and, I'm going to work and that kind of thing. We have an office and we have a team. And so on one level, it looked like everything was together, but on the other side, it's like, man, they really weren't together. Like they weren't together as much as I thought that they were.
Well, I think, again, going back to our different perspectives at the time, so everything you just described was what in my prayer time, the Lord was basically showing me, hey, there's your warning. And, we could sit there and we can say we were blindsided by all of the things because we were young and we didn't know. But at the same time, I'm sitting here going, okay, if we're going to be walking together and keeping the Lord at our center, then what does that actually look like to pay attention to those warnings, even if it kind of goes against the narrative in the natural? And so where you were seeing I'm the provider and I need to make sure that I keep my hand on the pulse of what's happening in the market and all of the things, my job as the helpmate was witnessing what the Lord was showing me through the word and through visions and everything he was speaking and going, hey, we're not supposed to go that route. And then trying to figure out how to actually merge those two things where there's still an allowance of here's what the Lord's warning. How do we either ease our way out of something or, whatever that was supposed to look like. That was, I think, looking through the rearview mirror, such a critical point in our faith walk and in our marriage and how do we communicate with each other and is my wife crazy versus what am I seeing in the natural? Is that actually unsafe? Should I listen to this? That was a hard learn in that season and in the next one as well.
So I know that I remember at that time, again, because the industry was set up the way it was, and again, I literally know now I was naive about a lot of things, and I knew how to like match what people were asking for with what was being offered and put those together. Yeah. And then the result of that is it's easy in your late 20s as I was at the time. It's like, okay, you make $20,000 a month, $30,000 a month. Like that is big money. We're talking back in 2006 and 2007. It's like, and then when you're young like that, my perspective was, oh wow, this is just how my life's going to look from this point and get better. Not that's all going to fall off and become zero. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't prepared for that. We didn't save adequately, didn't invest adequately, spend money like it was just going to be there tomorrow because guess what? It was there tomorrow, right? Mm-hmm. So there's all these things that I really made these miscues and these missteps that now looking back, my entire behavior's changed because of that. Not because of just that, but that was a huge part of like, hey, it could be here today, gone tomorrow. And literally that's kind of what happened. Mm-hmm. And I'm only mentioning this because there are maybe people that are in their 20s thinking, oh yeah, it only gets better from here. I would love that to be the case for everybody. I just know that it isn't. And that's part of why I wanted to share this story is not because I want the same thing for you or I'm projecting that that's your outcome, but be wise by taking an older person's advice while you're in your 20s now watching this and think about how you can save and preserve and invest now so that if something happens that you're not in control of at all, you'll at least have something for yourself to get through those hard times. Because we ended up having to rely on a lot of aid during that time that I know we're going to talk about too.
We did. And in that, I think that's kind of a natural segue into, we could talk about the things that hit the fan and all of the things that we learned as young parents in that and in our marriage in that, how do we listen to each other, et cetera. But really what we ended up finding in that season was how, okay, God warned, he knew what was coming because we chose to misstep and stay where we were geared towards. He still still helped pivot that course into a direction of, okay, well, if our house is going to be going through foreclosure because everything came out from under us and we no longer can actually afford the payment. What was it, 3 years that we didn't have a mortgage payment?
It was just shy of 3 years that we were basically in the process of being foreclosed, but because of how many were also happening in the market, we were like at the end of the line in this illustration. It's essentially by the time they decided, hey, you're going to be in foreclosure, that wasn't actually processed until like 2011, even though it had started in 2009. So all 2009, 2010, and 8 months of 2011, we made 0 house payment and still lived in that house.
Right.
And I know that sort of story is similar for a lot of other people too.
Yeah. And so then gearing it back towards how by our missteps did God allow us to rewrite that story from chaos to just really allowing that space in our home to become something that was for healing, that was for his work, his
community,
kingdom, his community, his church. Yeah. And that house turned into us raising small groups for teenagers in worship, and you having a men's group, me having a women's group, and us leading those things all in that space that was, really paid for, if you will, by God. We were able to further the process of healing in that because of our allowance to say, okay, well, we did misstep, God. How do you want us to use this?
Yeah, we were essentially in a place that we weren't paying for, but was provided for us, and we were not removed from it due to process. And there was a part of that we made a conscious choice. Because we were being allowed to stay here, we're going to maximize and use it for good and good for purposes that we believed in or believe in. Also, a really quick fun note. Do you remember that one Christmas? I was like, this might be our last Christmas here.
Yes.
And I staple gunned the Christmas lights in our living room. So I took just a single strand of like white lights and I like staple gunned it to the corner where the wall and the ceiling were. And then it had like the plug right there at the bottom, and you just plug it in and the lights came on. Well, we ended up being there for that Christmas and the next one and the next one, and our lights just kind of stayed up throughout the year because like, well, this is fun to have here.
It was.
And we'll eventually be gone out of here. And so it kind of became like a nice little movie theater kind of vibe actually. But that's funny. I think about that still to this day.
I remember that, but also one of my favorite memories is of the, 3 to 5 different families who in our financial situation being what it was, we were day to day, some days, like legitimately day to day. We didn't know what was going to be able to be paid. We had negative
we had negative bank account.
Over and over again.
Water and electric bills hadn't been paid, and they were a couple days from being like shut off. Like you get the notice like pay by this day or you're getting shut off. Like that was
our reality.
Encroaching on us.
Yes. And because of that, in the community that we were in, we very vaguely just asked for prayer requests. Just pray for our finances. Vague. We need to make sure that we're heading in the right direction financially. How do we actually bring ourselves back into a stable position? Everything fell out from under us. And so because of that, the Lord actually impressed upon the hearts of some really dear friends of ours specific amounts to actually give us. So you can go ahead and share this one.
Yeah, so it was over $3,000, and that collected the cumulative amount of that. This is back in 2008, 2009. That our friends who they knew that my career was mortgage. They were seeing in the news all of the catastrophe that's happened in the financial industry. Now, for those of you who are too young to remember or to have experienced this firsthand, there were people in the banking and finance industry that unfortunately took their own lives because of what they had done,
right?
Or what they had participated in, knowingly or unknowingly. And there were unfortunately news reports of people like walking in front of trains, jumping off of buildings, taking their own life in other ways because of the deep regret and resentment they had for what they had done because of the millions of people that were losing houses, ending up on the streets, losing everything they had saved. And there's another part of this story I'll tell, and maybe another day, which is about the Legal Aid Society and the Housing Coalition and all that work I did to help other people figure out how they could.
Well, I think that's part
save.
of this story and that timeline, though.
Well,
that
but I don't want to jump ahead.
Yeah.
And our friends coming to our relief is what I'm saying. That was happening because people were literally losing everything except for their relationship, and in some cases, their relationship too. And the reason I'm saying all that is because our friends didn't know the detail and the depth to which we needed help, but they came to our door with the provision that we needed at a time when we hadn't shared with them exactly how much it was and what it was for. But with all that money, we were able to pay for our electric bill to be brought up to be current, our water bill to be brought up to current. We were able to pay off the debt that we had been amassing debt on our credit cards to just buy gas and put food on the table and even just exist. And it was so, I remember being super embarrassed. Again, I was a lot younger and a lot more ashamed than I am nowadays. And I just felt I was humbled at the same time.
More shame than nowadays.
I was, look, there's a lot of things I just have like no shame in right now as a 46-year-old bald man.
Come on.
I've been bald since 29 when this all kicked off. Hey, that's maybe what it was. No, I'm saying all of this to provide some context that what was provided for us at that time when people answered the call to step forward with what we were looking for and what we needed, it was exactly what we needed to get out of that position and some.
Yeah, we probably were gifted about 200 maybe more than the actual amount we needed for that month.
For all that catch up.
And that was the most beautiful part is that, again, those who aren't driven in the Lord, he's absolutely the core of our marriage. And everything he did in that time was to show us, I've got your daily bread covered. I'm the one who's going to supply everything that you need. And then some, even to the point where these people have no clue exactly the amount. Each story of the people that came forward said, the Lord impressed this number on my heart for you. One of them was, we wanted to buy a brand new TV, but the Lord said, no, give this to the cruises. And those people are still friends to this day. And it's, these situations that only by prayer and faith did our house get taken care of in the way and then above the amount that we actually needed. And then to take another one, you remember when your parents came over?
Yes, but I was going to say, this is about responding to when you are prompted to do something.
Right.
And before we talk about my parents, I want to talk about how this helped us become better givers.
Right.
So one of the things that I attribute our, let's say, giving spirit, not just giving in finances, but giving in attention, giving in support, giving in opening up and welcoming people in, that was really bred out of this moment of our life where people abundantly were helping us in financial ways, in emotional ways, in spiritual ways, in physical ways. And something I've repeatedly told people to this day when they've struggled accepting help from people is that accepting help and being good at that will make you a better giver later when it's in your position and power to do so.
Yes.
And I think that's true for us.
Though. Absolutely. It absolutely is for us. But the other side of it was such a humbling thing. I remember you and I having these conversations where, they were heated because both of us were just in this place of, why is this our station? And I remember so clearly one day God said, who are you to tell me how I get to take care of your needs? And I was taken aback by that because, again, our parents are both sets of our parents are absolute crazy loving givers. All of our lives, I know both of our houses have been driven by that desire for, how do we care for them? How do we feed? How do we give money? How do we bring them in and love on them? Whatever it's been, our parents have always given that example of how to be givers in that sense. But also behind that, I think because we were also used to being the ones to give all the time, we didn't see the root that was really driven by unworthiness to be receivers. And how are we allowing ourselves to be taken care of by our Father in heaven rather than being the caregivers for other people that, might need it more?
It kind of forced us to be good on the receiving side, and the allowing others to provide to and through for us. Which then I think that then elevates the maturity of being able to know how to, because there's also there's like a peer-to-peer agreement nowadays when someone says, hey, I don't know. Hey, listen, I've been in those shoes. I know exactly how you feel, but I know that by you taking this humbly and just being grateful for it, that is going to make you a much better giver later, because I'm already on the other side of that. And us having lived through that challenging time is one of the things I credit a lot to the way we look at life now when it comes to opportunities to help other people and give and support and aid when those times are in need. And I remember something my dad told me, and my mom too, but in different conversations. It was, like, hey, I don't have this or that. And they're like, oh, cool, no problem. We'll give it to you. And I was like, well, no, I'm not asking you. Like, well, I know, but I'm going to give it to you anyways. And I was like, no, I don't want that. I'm my own man, right? Blah. And they're like, I remember my dad said once, he's like, listen, what are you going to say when one day, if one of your daughters has to ask you the same thing or says the same thing, what are you going to do?
Right.
And I didn't even have to answer because I knew the answer. Well, of course I'm going to help her, right? So he's like, okay, you need to let me help you then. I'm your dad. I'm supposed to help you.
Right.
So that was humbling at the same time, not humiliating at all. It was humbling. And that one moment you're talking about with them is one day, and I distinctly remember this, is we had one diaper left for Jillian.
Yes.
And one scoop of formula left.
Well, we had one bottle's worth.
So one feeding's worth of formula left. And I was like, I have no money. I have one diaper left and one bottle. How am I going to provide?
We're completely depleted.
Yeah, we didn't have any food.
No.
Like, how am I going to provide for this baby who's completely dependent on us feeding her? And I don't have money or food. And my parents went to Costco on their regular trip, and they filled their trunk with stuff for our house, and they just showed up. They called, hey, are you guys home? Yeah, we're home. What's up? Hey, open your garage. We're here. We went to Costco. We brought a bunch of stuff, and their entire trunk was full of milk, cereal. They bought the formula we needed. They brought diapers. They brought household supplies for us, and they restocked our cupboards. And they had not, I want to make sure this is super clear, they had not come through our house in the days prior to this to make a list and see what we were missing. No. They just were responding to a prompt that they felt brought into, and they responded and showed up, and they completely covered all those needs. It was crazy.
Yep. That is absolutely one of my favorite moments where the Lord had to humble, I know, my heart and yours in a way that you can't make those things up. And truly, nobody knew the extent of our need. Nobody. We were very vague and very quiet.
I didn't tell anybody we had one diaper left. No. Like, again, this is the younger, immature, ashamed part, or ashamed Andy. Like, I did not tell anybody. No, you and I knew that.
Yes.
No one else even knew that.
So I really felt like such an insanely beautiful gift in miraculous moves from our Father to us that made, I feed the birds of the air, and how much more valuable are you than they to me? I dress the lilies of the field. How much more do you think you matter that I'm not going to dress you? Even more so. And that solidified in me that understanding that by faith, even the size of a mustard seed, he's going to move the mountains out of our way. And debt and whatever else, doubt, trust, whatever, just caved in that one season.
Yeah. Yeah, and these are just some examples of just how provision was brought through other people to us. And, a lot of that kind of came together with, all right, well, then we ought to, with what we've been given, we ought to use this with great purpose. And that was a huge contributor to us being able to do that still. As small as it might have seemed, but as impactful and big as it actually turned out to be, such as opening up to small groups and teaching the junior high and high school worship teams at the time, here's what that actually looks like, and welcoming them into a process and them having a place outside of school or church where they can come and congregate and talk and have people that are going to listen to them and be interested in their life and invest in what they're caring about. And we were able to do that because of the, I'll say joint effort of everybody involved. all at the same time, while during the work week, like I have nothing to work on. The mortgage industry is completely imploded. There's actually something, some of you who are in finance might remember this. There's something called the Implodometer. And it was a website that was tracking every single day which banks closed overnight, which ones failed, which ones just folded up, and then which ones were like on the what they called the watch list, which was basically they're on deck to close in the next day or week or whatever. And every day we used to come to work where we had no work to do and we couldn't place loans anywhere because no one's funding loans. And we'd look at the Implodometer first, go, okay, what banks closed overnight? Do we have any loans there? And who's still open that we could send the loan to? And then we just wash, rinse, and repeated that. So that's happening in my professional life as you're at home with the kids. People are supporting us. We're doing outreach into our community groups. And it was just a wild, wild time.
It was. And I think, one of the things that I think I would like you to touch on, because it was really funny. Honestly, I think when you were going through all of that on the mortgage side of things, he comes home one day and he says, I'm working with the FBI.
Well, hold on.
And no. From the wife's perspective, I'm just looking at this going, okay, because everything was just, there was so much fraud that had happened. People were, you can go into that one, but there was so much fraud. People were being scammed out of money right and left, and they've lost everything because of the fraudulent activity within the mortgage industry.
Yep.
And so Andy comes home and he's like, so I'm working with the FBI, and they were doing these
It was called the
clinics.
Housing Opportunities Collaborative, and we're doing housing clinics for people who don't know what happened in their house finances or their mortgage or their title, and they were bringing their documents to these clinics to have us basically look at what they were sold, signed up for, or whatever, and identifying if there was crime done in that process or not, because of being an insider who knows how the process works, underwriting and approval, and being able to observe where someone had committed wire fraud, signature fraud, identification theft. The whole FBI thing is a little later in the line of the story because we had identified that the people were basically victims of financial crimes as a part of this whole thing that was happening in 2005, 2006, 2007, before the collapse. And then when the collapse happened, there's no one to offer help. This group was put together by Jamila Ayad, and then it involved the Department of Real Estate, the local police department, the sheriff, the FBI, the Legal Aid Society, because you had attorneys, realtors, mortgage people, brokers, all involved in helping just provide to the public a place where they could come and get their documents read, and like basically translated so they knew whether they had something wrong or not, so they could sleep safe at night, sleep safe and sound knowing that everything's fine, or you need to go talk to the guy at the end of the table in the black suit and answer some questions. And so that was one of the funniest moments that stuck out to me when you came home, and I thought, there are so many things I could think about this, but I think the funniest thing is we have nothing to hide. They researched whatever they needed to on your background, my background. I'm like, our house is this
probably
guy's credit
tapped.
sucks.
Like there were just things that I looked at. I'm like, well, we've got nothing to nothing to hide. We're fine. But it was so funny. We're working with the FBI, which means our entire life has probably been, researched, uprooted, whatever.
I would like to make it very clear that I was not going to the field office and like wearing undercover wires and stuff like that. I was literally volunteering at this housing clinic. And then depending on what I saw, I would say, you're fine, go over here, talk to that person, or go talk to that guy over there. And then they'd get followed up. But here's what's really sad that happened during that time is people were unknowingly victims of all sorts of financial fraud and crimes, and some of them lost a lot of money or lost a lot of equity or both. And there's a couple of things I distinctly remember. One day there was a group of people that were kind of all sitting in the same like row in the waiting room or the waiting area, and they were like started talking to each other, and they actually had the same play run on both of them. They didn't know each other. They had no clue, but like, oh yeah, that's the same office did this and that. And it was basically the same set of players who had done the same fraud to these people who happened to just be sitting next to each other in that room, waiting to come and talk to one of us. Another one was this elderly senior couple that had come in, and they had shown me their closing statement. I was looking at it, and they're like, "Oh, we can't make our payment anymore, and our mortgage payment is like through the roof, and this and that." And I was like, "Well, where's all this money?" They go, what do you mean? I was like, well, it says cash back to borrower, $100,000. Where's this $100,000 cash out you guys took? And like, we didn't take any cash out. And what had happened was basically the players in the part of the escrow process were in on it, where they had cashed out equity from their house, but instead of it being wired to their account, it was wired to the participants that had done the loan, the escrow, and all that. And they never saw a single penny of it, and that money was long gone, and their equity was stolen essentially.
That's crazy.
And that was that. And there's others that stood out, but those are the two primary ones I find myself telling these days. And my role really was just to decipher, interpret, and then relay the person and their case to whichever department needed to see it next, Department of Real Estate or FBI or the police or whatever. So. Well, that was a crazy time.
Yes, that was a crazy time. And at the same time that all of this is happening, you and I and our kids, really, because this really just ushered us into a whole different season of ministry during that time, not just with small groups, but it really brought us into, for about 6 months, the Lord had been saying, Jenn, I want you to work with high school kids. And I, over and over, said, You're crazy. There's no way I'm doing this. And I hate high schoolers. There's no part of me that wants to work with teenagers.
Now we have high schoolers.
But in that season, it was literally about 6 months of me saying, nope, not doing it, not doing it, not doing it. Finally, one Sunday, I was pregnant with Claire, our third, and I am 2 weeks away from giving birth to her. 2 weeks. And the Lord said, high school. This was a Sunday morning. And I said,
I remember this.
Okay, fine. If you really are wanting me to do this, then you make me run into the high school youth pastor. And there was an upper campus and a lower campus, and I never saw the youth pastor ever. So we're on the lower campus at the adult service, and I, go in, we do church, and then we're on our way out. And here comes Luke Crosby. And he goes, oh, Jenn, I was looking for you. And in my head, I'm son of a biscuit eater. He wanted to talk to me about the youth and working with them. And we ended up talking about building worship programs for the kids and teaching them how to raise up in that. And that was an interesting season of building into these kids while having itty bitties of our own. I'm sitting here trying to breastfeed on a couch with teenagers everywhere, and it didn't go well.
No, it did go well.
No, because poor Claire.
What are you talking about?
No, I felt like as a mom who's raising these itty bitties, I felt like Claire was kind of cut short on the whole. It was what it was, but you knew the Lord was calling us into it, and he did some pretty amazing things, all to say that in a season that was falling apart in everything around us, God still knew where he was going to need us to grow and trust him and shape not only you and I in our marriage, but as individuals. Do I trust that I'm hearing you properly? Are you confirming that with the people that I've been asking you to show me? And he was like, yup, to where we couldn't deny it. So I started it, and you very quickly followed. And that was a good, maybe 10 months of our life. It was like 9 or 10 months.
Oh, I feel like it was more than that.
Hardcore being in it. And then I weaned out because, again, the kids were so young.
And then 3 young daughters.
Yeah, but in that season, we ended up really bringing some kids that absolutely had these amazing anointings on their lives into this arena of what worship is and it's supposed to be. So that was really, for me, that was my takeaway of, yes, there's the chaos of what's happening in the natural. And then there's the Lord still saying in the middle of it, hey, I know you lost everything. However, I'm still going to need you to put your attention over here, because I know that on the other side of your obedience here, there's still going to be provision. There's still going to be care. You're going to be just fine.
Yeah, it's kind of even though all this other stuff has happened and it's kind of washed away, what is still left of you that can be used? What can you put your hand to help and be of benefit to others and value and purpose for? And that was one of those things. And I'm over here chuckling when you're like, oh, make me run into the high school pastor. And then Luke pops around the corner. Like, that was such a funny.
I was so mad.
I was standing there. I was like, okay, this is exactly what you. But hey, you're sitting at the poker table with the house owner.
Yeah,
and he's like,
he called me out.
Here's I'll deal you a hand. So I also want to make sure that in this whole 2008, 2009, there's a little extension in 2010 into this because a couple things happened. I had my car repossessed. Man, that made me
that
so.
was a day.
That
guys.
was a day
Holy
because they had been. What ended up happening is they had been tailing you. I had been telling the bank, I will turn the car over. I will bring it to you and hand you the keys to avoid being stranded somewhere. I intentionally did this. And yet what they still did is they sent a repo guy, followed you, and while you were in the store with
all 3 kids.
With the kids, they yanked the car and took it and left you stranded, which is exactly the reason I said I'll proactively give them. Apparently, I'm still angry about this. They left you stranded down there, just right over the Village Walk.
Yeah.
And man, that made me so like frustrated as a dad and a father and a husband. And I was so upset. And
they took the car seats. Everything was
well,
in
the
it.
car seats were in it. Your bag was in it. You had like your keys and your little like clutch wallet thingy because you're getting like, I don't know, groceries
something
or
small from
frozen
the store.
yogurt or something. I don't know what it was, but you were just there real quick, and that's why you had that that clutch and then your keys, and everything else was in the car. And then Eric actually came and took me to the tow yard, and like I confronted the guy, and this dude was way bigger than me, way more gruff than me, and I was like, oh man, I'm gonna die if my mouth starts running off. But I said a couple things. And I was like, look, you left my wife stranded. You followed her. You didn't need to do that. And we offered to give the bank the keys and just turn it over. He's like, yeah, well, they called me to come to pick it up. I'm just doing my job. I'm like, yeah, you're doing your job, but like my baby's bag is in there, our car seats are in there, and I had to go drive my wife and my kids home without the car seats because you took them, and you knew that. So like, and I was like, you know what, and you know what, and I said a couple words, got our stuff, and got out of there. Yeah. But I was on fire that day.
Yeah,
I was hot.
So all that to say, the humbling and the maturity that was able to grow out of that nonsense. Those are core memories we'll never ever lose because it really helped shape our direction moving forward, which really launched the next season.
Well, there's two things I want to also say within the context of this whole car being repossessed thing, which was Mark and Steph. Remember they had the Corolla?
Yeah.
Remember they let us use that car, and this is the Corolla that had like the roll down windows, like the manual locks, like up down. You're reaching across. That was awesome. Thank you guys so much for letting us borrow that car for a long time. And then I also have this car really to this day. I wish I still had it because I just loved it. I loved it for what it was. Remember when Kenny Kim gave me that old Range Rover?
Yes.
It was black, but it had spray painted the hood with like a matte finish, and it was just like someone had rewired the windows so the front controlled the back ones, and the back ones controlled the front, and the hood liner was fallen. I loved that stupid car because
it was a beater.
It was a beater.
It was a crazy beater.
It was literally the one that he drove up to the mountains to go snowboarding and skiing because he's like, we're gonna beat the crap out of this thing, and it's just gonna get us home, and that's why we literally use it to beat the crap out of.
Yeah,
and that became my car.
Not an AC. It was a heat.
I forgot.
In the middle of the summer.
The AC didn't work, so the AC wouldn't turn off. And so you had to it would do climate control. So it would like, what's the outside temperature? What's the inside temperature? So I'm over here pushing the button like up when it was hotter and lower when it's colder just to keep the fan at the slowest speed.
And it was in the summer. It was super hot AC. Like it was just this unit that was
blowing hot air.
It was great.
Oh, but the reason I mention that is because, here's really what happened is Kenny gave me that car. And I said, I just in my heart can't accept it. And he's like, okay, fine, give me $1,000. And I was like, no, I'll buy it. He goes, seriously? If you don't stop, if you want to give me $1,000, give it to me. You don't have to. And so I remember I gave him $1,000 for the car just so I felt like I bought it, even though he really just gave it to us. But I really wish I still had that Rover because I didn't care what happened to it, man. I drive that thing off road in the sand and the dirt. And remember we put Charlie in it? Oh, we had our boxer Charlie. Yeah. She was a good dog.
She was great.
But the people coming to us in aid in that sense too, even just so we could get back and forth and transport our family to the things we were going to and volunteering at and participating at, that was a critical juncture to our life too. So a lot came out of 2008 and 2009. And then, of course, it ended up in 2011. we ended up having to leave the house. They did something called cash for keys. So for those of you who don't know, cash for keys was basically an exchange program where they say, hey, we'll pay you to leave. Just give us the keys. And so we ended up doing cash for keys where we left with a couple $1,000s. We turn over the keys to the house and they basically reclaim the house and they repossess it. And it's their house and we move out. Now, the reason I'm bringing this up is because something that I think is really funny happened. We ended up having a moving day and we were going to move to my parents' house. So they lived across the way. And at that time, we were just really connected with lots of our groups, growth groups, our marriage group, our church, and all that, and also our friends. And I think I had 27 men helping.
It was a lot.
Move. And I remember them all being at the house. Jeremy Karlovitz rented a truck that he said was his, but wasn't his. He basically paid for it, a Penske truck with a lift and everything, because what ended up happening is he couldn't use his truck because of insurance and liability because it wasn't for import-export transportation. Right. They're helping us move. So I don't know if you know this, he basically rented the truck.
I vaguely remember that.
Right.
Yeah.
So that happened, and all these guys are at the house, and you're like, I'm going to go get donuts and coffee. I'll be right back. So while Jen is out getting donuts and coffee, our entire 3-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom house is moved out and into this truck in less than 1 hour. Jen comes back with donuts and the coffee, and we're all standing around, and like I had already even like swept the downstairs, and she's like, "Where's all our stuff?" I'm like, "It's already in the truck. We're waiting on the donuts and coffee because everyone just went to work." It was like ants. It was crazy. What was that like for you to come in and be like, "Where's all our things?"
Surreal, and it was like, I think for part of my brain that was trying to release the house because it was our first house with all 3 of our daughters. I think it almost happened too fast but I feel like the Lord was like, let's just pull the tablecloth off the table because you won't leave otherwise. It was such a surreal thing, not only to see how helpful people were, but to also see that we were being carried into the next season by a village. And that was a beautiful thing that, you feel alone a lot of the times in seasons of loss. That was a huge season of loss. I mean, looking back at that, being in the middle of the cars being
repossessed, our life being uprooted,
literally
business failing,
all the things. It was we had faith and hope in the middle of it, but on the back end, it was like, I'm a gardener, so when I uproot a garden at the beginning of spring, I tend to look at the whole thing and I go, okay, let's rip out the old and let's start with a fresh palette or slate, whatever. And now I can look at this and plan out what's going to benefit our family most from here. To me, it felt like the ripping up of a garden and all that work that went into building that past season, the tilling of the soil and the pulling of the weeds and all of the things that went into that. It was like it was ripped up so hard, so fast, and then burned at the same time. Like every remnant was just burned. So the coming into that reality of, okay, well, this is our brand new season. What do we need to do with this, Lord? And what I didn't know at the time, which is, I guess something we can take into the next conversation, what actually happened from that season was I had been writing music and the Lord had really put it on my heart to make that an album. And at the same time, I auditioned for The Voice and came back.
American Idol.
And what was funny about those things is I said, okay, Lord, if this is for me, give me favor and open those doors. If it is not for me, I have absolute peace with that direction. And I came home from the Voice audition and they gave me a maybe. And there were specific, what's the word they're looking for? Specific look and sound. Genre, whatever. And if you matched it, great. If you didn't, that was it. But for me, they gave me a maybe and said, if you don't hear from us by 10 p.m. tonight, then this was literally right after we moved into your parents' house in
And
2011.
just for context, this is the year that Ruben Stoddard won. Ruben Stoddard won, and Clay Aiken. They were there, the top 1 and 2, and they were definitely had an angle on what they were looking for. They actually said that to a lot of the participants of, hey, we're looking for this kind
for
of
American Idol and for that. So all that to say,
oh yeah, not The Voice. Sorry, I was talking about American Idol, but that was the
American
season.
Idol and The Voice. But for me specifically, that was such an interesting launching into music, because we moved straight into your parents' house that same year. I had auditioned for the Voice, that one, and then I came home with a baby, and I was sitting at the dining room table praying, okay, Lord, I clearly didn't get that. That's okay. What do you want me to be doing? Do you still want me to pursue this path? And I had finished my journaling, and I was going through the house mid-worship, just blaring worship to the Lord. And I get a call from Sarah Huntley, who is now one of my best friends. And she is, an author of, if you can't see where, can you see where we're pointing?
Over here on the bookshelf, we have Sarah's book, the USS Indianapolis story.
Who's just this phenomenal woman. But at the time, I didn't know her at all. I met her maybe twice before. Once was at her wedding. Andy went to college with Sarah, and Sarah was Andy's ex-girlfriend's roommate.
But Sarah and I figured out that she had gone to Rancho Bernardo Middle School.
Yes.
Rancho Bernardo Middle School when my dad was the assistant principal there. Yeah. So at college, we figured out that she was at the middle school where my dad was the assistant principal, and we had just never met because we lived down here in Bonita.
So Dad knew her.
It was so crazy.
Yeah. But all of that, we can tie that up into another,
But Sarah called you.
Sarah called. And so Sarah had called Andy first saying, hey, the Lord gave me a word for Jenn. Do you want to tell her what it is? And he says, no, here's her number. Call her yourself. So I'm an hour and a half outside of that prayer of, God, do you want me to still keep going with this? And I get a call from Sarah, and Sarah said, I never do this. I've never done this before. But the Lord told me to call you and tell you that what he has placed you in, I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember the exact words, it's journaled somewhere, but what I have called you into, I want you to keep going towards, because I have big plans for you in that direction. And I knew it was music. And so because of that phone call and that answer from the Lord, I then completed my album, You Get What You Get, is what it's called. And God ended up giving us this amazing journey into working in Tennessee with these amazing people. And there's no way I could have planned that.
That's
ever.
That's a whole show.
Story in itself.
Yeah.
There's no way. But what we didn't know what was happening from all of that loss, the Lord was repositioning us into this season of launching into a new version of music and of what even worship was. And
it's being restationed in one way and repurposed at the same time. Mm-hmm. And there's some amazing things that had come from that. And I like that you kind of pivoted into that, because I also want to make sure we're not just recalling these moments of like sadness or tension and frustration for us as a couple and as individuals in this story, but there's great that can come from that. Yeah. And a lot of times, I know this is probably more for me right now than anyone watching, is like, hey, when there's tough times, like that doesn't mean that they're always going to remain tough. They're not going to stay tough. And there's always, light at the end of the tunnel, and there's a silver lining, and all these little, platitudes that we say to each other when things are hard, but it is true. And there are times where there's seasons where it might feel like there's a dark cloud over you all day long. You're in the valley, you're in the dark, it's in the depths, and you're trudging through stuff, and there will be a better day. There will be a clearing. There will be light at the end of it, because we're walking through that. This is just the first story of catastrophic loss we've had. There's another one that's coming up later that is, again, very similar in some regard and extremely different in another. But I wanted to just take a pit stop and share with people that we're living out the other side of going through those trials and tribulations, and then growing as those things are happening, kind of compounding and exponentially growing in maturity and those things as you let them refine you.
Well, and that's a key thing right there, I think, too, where we can and have, like we were even sharing in the last episode, the first episode, where you can continue going around the mountain over and over and over again and continue the unhealthy cycles over and over again and never learn from them. And people have lived their entire lives in just poor habits and addictions and traumas that they don't want to learn from, or victimhood or poverty or whatever you want to, whatever your story is. Ours had all of those things attached to it. And because of that, we have learned through seasons of repetitive idiocy, is what I'll call it, then where the Lord's like, here's a hard and fast break where you're going to have to actually release this and learn from it. Because if you don't, you're going to do a lot more damage, which then leads us to the next fall apart, because after, that's a whole nother level of direction. But by choosing to be humbled, choosing to allow God to correct and redirect, only then were we able to go into the next season of launching and growth and learning. And then our kids got to be witness to a whole lot of that growth and repositioning.
So something you had said in the previous episode was that, it's important now that you're providing context to the girls now that they're older about things they may recall from when they were younger. And this is one of those seasons of life where they were brand new. Caitlin was born in 2005, Jill in 2007, and Claire in 2009. Well, so us talking about 2008, 2009, they're like, brand new born.
Yeah, they have no idea.
3 and 5, not 3 and 5, 2 and 4. And so now it's important I want them to hear this whole thing because they're much older now. And they may not remember living through all these things, but I think that there's key things that they can take from this. And all of you too, who might be in a situation in life where you might be relating to something we talked about, either in the wife side or husband side or mom side, dad side, business person side, stay-at-home side. Like there's something in here for you. And it
Am I going to be obedient to where the Lord's calling me side? Like there was a lot in that where in the middle of God, we have enough to focus on right now. I don't need to start a ministry. And because he was adamant, he knew what was needing to be done in that season. And it wasn't, I think that's the other side too, that we could become so self-absorbed in our own trials and turmoil and whatever, that we can look so much with horse blinders on that we miss. He's orchestrating so many other things around us that include us, that is for the sake of the betterment of the community, not just the fact that your life might look like it's falling apart, but really I'm just burning off more of the dross. And because you're letting me do that and you're working in the building of a new ministry, I'm going to be able to launch you by your faith in this new season to come once you let go of all of the things that have been broken in the last season.
And so specifically, I brought that up because I know that for our own daughters, there's things in here that you'll now have context for. And for anyone who we don't know, that's just a general audience member and someone we'll never maybe even meet. Like maybe there's something in here that you can take away that's beneficial for you to learn from, glean from, and carry forward. Yeah. But I think I'm just connecting that in the previous episode, you had mentioned that there's things now it's important for you as a mom to tell the girls about with more context to help them understand, not to remove a core memory and replace it with something else. So like, take the bad out and replace it with good, but to give full depth and what the conditions were based on that point in life. Right. That now we can go back and look at, share some more wise takeaways, and them also be at an age where they understand what that means now. When they're brand newborn, they don't know what any of this is, let alone that it happened.
And even really how to, when they start their own families, really be able to start applying some of those lessons, because, one of the greatest things I've learned from the Lord is I don't have to be the one to learn from my own mistakes. I can learn from those who've gone ahead of me and, from where they veered off to where they re-established their steps in the Lord. I don't have to hurt from my own mistakes. I can learn from those ahead of me.
So this is a great, I think, transition where what we're going to talk about next, I think in chronological order, is going to be you get what you get. So we have an episode coming up that's about that and the entire kind of trajectory of how that came to be from when it was first impressed upon you, what you wrote, how it all unfolded, the people connected, and then what we ended up with. So we're going to go there next. And then that actually goes to another story from that same season, is the rise and the fall of 9010 brand and all that. So much more to come from Andy and Jenn talk about stuff. Thank you. Oh, I always want to end by saying something nice about you. Can I do that right now?
Okay.
I think you look cute in glasses. I like those glasses. Yeah.
It just happens that my eyesight's crap, so I win.
Thank you, Peter Huang. If you guys are looking for a great optometrist, go see Peter at H Street Optometry. Well, you look really cute in glasses, and I like those. So thank you for being here with me today. Thank you for doing this together.
And on my side of this, I want to thank you for choosing to build something for us now. There have been many, many years where you have lovingly and very passionately driven the direction of our train for the sake of trying to help everybody and their mother, because you are such a helper and you're such a networker, and that huge grizzly bear heart of yours, you know, can just give it all 200%. If you know Andy, he is a 200% guy. Like, there are 100% people, and they're hard workers, and I'm, you know, no discredit to what you put forward, but I married someone who gives 200% on every level, hot or cold, it doesn't matter. But taking that 200% Andy and putting it towards what we are all gifted with as a family, with film, with music, with, you know, just fun. I really, really love and appreciate your heart and your drive towards whatever the Lord is now opening up for us as the Cruz family into this new season. So I'm glad to be able to do this with you now, because that's always been my dream.
Well, thank you for saying that. I am really excited about doing this. We have all the conditions set up for us to be able to do this successfully and share honestly and openly with people. So thank you for letting me do this in a space that I know we can do it regularly like this and with ease and comfort for one another and for everyone who's watching. So thank you, Jenn, and thank you all for watching. Remember, if you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, subscribe to the channel. You're going to hear a lot more from us, and like this video, and then also share this with somebody who you know might need to hear this story. Remember, not everybody is verbally saying the problem that they might be encountering in their life, but they might be giving you clues along the way that there might be something underneath the surface happening or behind the scenes that maybe you could give them some aid, some support, some love, and some encouragement. So if something we shared today resonates with you or someone you know and love, make sure to share this with them as well. And as for me and Jenn, we are going to continue talking about stuff, and we'll see you on the next episode.
And that's the way the cookie crumbles.
Oh man, yeah, we should end that way, huh? Right? Walter Cronkite.
Thank you, Jim Carrey.